Thank you to our first panel for a fantastic start to today's agenda. Founders Forum is thrilled to be teaming up with our sister company accelerateHER to be co-hosting this next session. And I'm delighted to welcome the next speakers to the stage. Arianna Huffington, founder of the Huffington Post and now founder and CEO of Thrive Global, joins us today to discuss maintaining balance in times of turmoil, mental health, well-being, and what effective leadership looks like as we seek to define the new normal. A longtime friend of Founders Forum, Arianna has been named to Time Magazine's list of the world's 100 most influential people, not surprisingly, I might add, also Forbes' most powerful women list, and is a New York Times best-selling author. With us to interview Arianna this afternoon is a new friend of our community, an upcoming fantastic entrepreneur of the moment and capturing the zeitgeist, Reeva Misra. Reeva is the founder and CEO of a new exciting digital wellness platform called Walking on Earth. Reeva, Arianna, welcome to you both, and thank you so much for joining us today. Reeva, over to you.
Thank you, Brent, for the kind introduction. I'm thrilled to be here today with the fabulous Arianna Huffington to discuss an issue that's really on the top of all of our minds at the moment, and one very close to my heart, which is how we can take these lessons from the pandemic and from the terrible crises at the moment to really prioritize our well-being and almost take this as a global reset to think about what's important in our lives and what we want to persist with going forward. And there really is no better person to talk about this than Arianna. So Arianna, it feels like we're at this inflection point in our society at the moment. There's so much pain, so much sorrow and fear, but at the same time, this pain is being used as a catalyst for change. We're seeing, it's like there's so many lessons that we're seeing, and you've really been at the forefront of talking about how we can use these lessons going forward to create a more positive, sustainable future. And there's so much we could talk about, but if you had to choose just 3 lessons that you think are really important at an individual level to creating a better future, what would they be?
First of all, thank you so much, Reeva. I'm thrilled to be here with you and with Brent and the team. I totally agree with you that this is a global reset. And for me, the first lesson is to recognize that we should not really want to go back to the world we left behind, because it was a world filled with an enormous amount of problems, inequalities, racial injustice, and also a global epidemic of burnout that had led to a dramatic increase in mental health problems, in chronic diseases. So the first lesson is to use this moment to imagine and build and fight for a better, fairer, more compassionate world, and not just to want to go back, although of course there are a lot of things about going back, like seeing our friends without social distancing, that we are all longing for. But we need to look at the big changes that we want to see in our world and take advantage of this catalyst, which is exactly what it is. The second point I want to make is that everything is really dependent on our behaviors. And as you know, Reeva, that's what I created Thrive Global to address. How do we help people move from awareness of how we should be living our lives, how we should treat our neighbors, to actually action? From knowing what to do to actually doing it. It's very hard. If you include mental health, the diseases we're dealing with, whether physical or mental, are 90% behavioral. Mm-hmm. So for this reason alone, not to mention our own health and happiness, we need to learn how to change behaviors. And at Thrive, we have recognized through all the latest science that we change behavior through micro steps, small daily incremental steps that help us adopt healthier habits. And after all, as human beings, we are the product of our habits. And the third point I want to make, and that's something you and I have talked a lot about, including during that amazing time we're together in India, is that we need to remember and recognize the ancient wisdom we have forgotten, which is the recognition that we all have in us a place of strength, peace, wisdom that we have forgotten as we've been living our lives breathlessly and frenetically and from the shallows. And we need to reconnect with that part. Nobody lives there all the time, maybe some saint that I haven't met, but we can all learn how to course correct and return to that place, which is, if you want, the eye in the hurricane from which we can address all the challenges that we are facing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I completely agree. And, you know, I think in practice, we all agree and we all say we need to take these lessons going forward, and we can't return back to the lives we were living. You know, I think it would be almost a complete, utter betrayal to the frontline workers, the people that have died in the crisis, the structural and black balances that have been shown through this epidemic. But going back to what you were talking about, micro steps, how do we actually ensure, you know, that we can translate these lessons in practice when we go back to, you know, the everyday stresses in our lives, when we go back to our work and the personal life, we tend to forget these important lessons from ancient wisdom. So how, through what you're teaching at Thrive and through these micro steps, do we ensure we carry out these lessons in practice?
Well, what is great, Reeva, is that we can actually use technology to help us. You know, instead of being used by technology, we can use it to support these changes. So at Thrive, we have launched a behavior change platform that is like a coach in our pocket, that personalizes the micro steps that we are all more likely to engage in, and adds a lot of storytelling and content that connects with our heart. We have found that the way to really make these changes is to bring together the latest science-backed micro steps with storytelling and ancient wisdom that can help us make these changes. And our platform has divided this into 4 journeys. The first journey is recharge, which is basically sleep, which is foundational, as you know, to our immunity, and 60-second recharging breaks during the day so we don't let stress accumulate. Fuel, which is about nutrition and movement. Focus, which is harder and harder these days because stress makes it harder for us to focus and be productive. And connect, which is how can we connect with ourselves, with our loved ones, with our colleagues, with our communities.
Amazing. I think it's so important. And going to the fourth pillar that you're talking about connection, I think that's something that's especially important in our workplaces today, because, you know, workplace culture has been completely upended. And this is something you talk about at Thrive as well, about, you know, how we can change this culture of burnout, of viewing stress as almost like a necessary byproduct of success. And so how do you think we can use these lessons, you know, that have completely transformed our working lives into creating workplaces that are happier and healthier, and that create better environments for our employees as well?
Well, what is great now, Reeva, is that companies are recognizing the connection between the well-being of their employees and the performance of the company. That is something relatively new. And I wrote a piece actually in the Harvard Business Review last week about the dominance, the new dominance of the HR leaders in each company, because the health and well-being of employees is now a front burner issue. So we can use this opportunity to also look at the latest science that shows that when we build a very thriving company culture, it affects the bottom line. So a thriving culture for us at Thrive and what we offer to other companies starts with the value of compassionate directness.
Yeah.
We're encouraging a culture where people can express when something is not working, can disagree, and do it compassionately, not adversarially, but do it, is, we believe, the first step. And then to recognize that performance, high performance, should not excuse bad behavior.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of very simply call it no brilliant jerks allowed. Like, no matter how great you may be at your job, if you're actually a toxic element in the culture, in the end, it's going to affect the business.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, leading with empathy and compassion, it sounds so simple, but it really is transformative. And the effects could be, could really change our society tremendously, I think. So, I mean, a question for you. If you could imagine a workplace post the pandemic that would be your ideal workplace culture, let's say in 2025, what would it look like?
Oh, first of all, I hope it will be 2021, Reeva. I'm an optimist. Don't want to wait until 2025. I feel the first thing we need to do is this mindset shift. Abandon the idea that we need to be always on in order to succeed. Abandon this frenetic, breathless way of living, and prioritize building a good life, not just a successful life in terms of money and power / status. That mindset shift is absolutely critical. And it's going to affect how we show up at work, because when we show up burned out and exhausted, we are not going to be our most empathetic or our most creative. Empathy and creativity are the first things that are sacrificed when we are running on empty and are depleted. So everything is interconnected. And approaching the whole human is really the way to look at the next chapter that we are building together, and recognizing that what is best for employees' well-being is also going to be best for the company bottom line. It's really what they tell us on airplanes. Put your own oxygen mask on first before helping others.
I love that analogy. And that is a lovely workplace that I would love to live in. And, I think it is possible to enable such an ideal to manifest if we come together and have that strong sense of clarity and purpose and cohesion. And so one final question before we close. If you could give, the audience listening today just one lesson or one micro step that they could take with them, and in this incredibly challenging time, if they could form a habit out of it, what would that one lesson be?
So, Reeva, as you know, we have hundreds of micro steps at Thrive, but my absolute favorite is picking a time at the end of the day that you declare the end of your working day. It's an arbitrary end, because the truth is there is no end to our working day if we have an interesting job. But we need to pick an end to our working day, and we mark that through the simple ritual of turning off our phone and charging it outside our bedroom. And now it may sound very big, since 72% of people sleep with their phones by their side. But again, start small. You can start by doing that one day a week and seeing the impact it has. And then you can keep adding more days. The truth is that the phone is really the repository of every project, every problem, every challenge we're dealing with. And we need to separate ourselves from it in order to be able to truly recharge and start the day ready to face whatever the day brings.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. And I really hope the audience listening today can actually make a commitment to themselves to take a micro step and take a lesson, and actually, commit to causing long-term change from what this crisis has shown us. So thank you so much, Arianna, for sharing your lessons with us today. It's incredibly pertinent to these times and really, really valuable for us.
Thank you so much, Reeva, and thank you for creating Walking on Earth, so needed and important at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And Laura, I'll hand over to you to close off.
Thank you so much. And just thank you so much, Arianna and Reeva, for an incredibly inspiring session. It's so important that we use these lessons that we've learned during the pandemic to change the way that we live and work going forward. And I really hope that everyone checks out the amazing work you're both doing and does that. And thank you to everyone for joining us. Please stick around for the next session on cybersecurity and the future of work with Michelle Zatlin, co-founder of Cloudflare, Poppy Gustafsson, CEO of Darktrace, and Dr. Hayatun Salem, Chief Executive of the Royal Academy of Engineering.